For decades, Prince Andrew was known as the Queen's favorite son, a royal who once carried himself with confidence and the privilege of birthright. But in recent years, his reputation has crumbled before the eyes of the world. Scandal, controversy, and a series of disastrous public moments have left him stripped of titles, dignity, and much of the public's trust. Now, devastating new details have emerged that cast his life and choices in an even darker light. What was once whispered in private circles is now being revealed in shocking clarity. Stories that raise serious questions about how far Andrew's behavior went and how much the royal family knew but kept hidden. The man once celebrated as a decorated naval officer and war hero has been overshadowed by allegations and associations that continue to haunt him. Each revelation cuts deeper, not only damaging Andrew's standing, but shaking the very foundations of the monarchy itself. These new details are not just another chapter in a long-running scandal. They paint a picture of a royal who believed he was untouchable, shielded by his status and connections. But now, with truth surfacing in ways that can no longer be ignored, Andrew faces a legacy defined not by service or loyalty, but by disgrace. What are these devastating new details? How did they remain hidden for so long? And what do they mean for the future of the royal family itself? The answers reveal a story that is as shocking as it is tragic, and one that could permanently alter the way history remembers Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew's fall from grace has been one of the most dramatic and public scandals to ever shake the British royal family. For much of his life, Andrew enjoyed a reputation as the charming and adventurous prince. Nicknamed the Playboy Prince by the press, he was often seen at glamorous parties, mingling with celebrities, and living a lifestyle that attracted endless media fascination. He was also a naval officer who served with distinction during the Falklands War, earning a reputation for bravery that briefly overshadowed his wild personal life. For years, Andrew seemed to embody the balance between royal duty and youthful charisma. But behind the polished exterior and carefully managed public image, troubling details about his private conduct were beginning to surface. These were whispers at first, rumors of questionable friendships, reckless behavior, and a tendency to surround himself with figures who raised eyebrows within the palace. While the royal family often sought to downplay or deny such stories, insiders suggested that Andrew's arrogance and sense of entitlement created a blind spot that left him vulnerable to dangerous associations. One of the earliest warning signs came from his relationship with controversial businessmen and socialites who offered him luxury, access, and attention. To Andrew, these connections seemed harmless, a way of maintaining the lavish lifestyle he had grown accustomed to. But as time passed, these friendships would form the basis of the scandal that later consumed him. Critics argued that Andrew failed to recognize the risks of being associated with people whose reputations were already tarnished. Or worse, that he simply didn't care. The devastating new details that have now emerged highlight just how deep this pattern went. Palace staff have described how Andrew often ignored advice, refusing to distance himself from those who could damage the monarchy's image. Behind closed doors, he was said to be stubborn, demanding, and dismissive of those who questioned his choices. Friends of the family later revealed that even the Queen herself struggled to rein in her son, whose belief in his own invulnerability seemed unshakable. This refusal to change course set the stage for the scandals that would follow. Andrew's name began appearing more frequently in headlines, not for his royal duties or military service, but for his questionable judgment and troubling connections. For the monarchy, an institution that relies heavily on public trust and moral authority, this was a disaster. Every new revelation chipped away at the carefully crafted image of stability the royal family had worked so hard to maintain. And yet, Andrew remained defiant. When confronted with criticism, he often insisted he had done nothing wrong, that his behavior was being misinterpreted, or that he was the victim of unfair scrutiny. This attitude only deepened public resentment, as many saw it as further proof of arrogance and a refusal to take accountability. Now, the new details being uncovered show that the cracks in Andrew's reputation were visible long before the scandals exploded. Those closest to him say his downfall was not a sudden collapse, but a slow unraveling that could have been prevented if he had heeded the warnings. Instead, his choices, shaped by privilege, entitlement, and poor judgment, brought him to the point where he is today, disgraced, isolated, and stripped of the respect he once enjoyed. The turning point in Prince Andrew's public image came with his association with Jeffrey Epstein. For years, Epstein had cultivated friendships with wealthy, powerful, and influential figures across the world. But when the full scale of his crimes came to light, those connections became toxic. Andrew's name, tied so visibly to Epstein's, was no longer just a whisper in the background of royal gossip. It became headline news. Photographs emerged showing Andrew with Epstein at social events, walking together in Central Park, and even spending time at Epstein's properties. For a senior member of the British royal family, the optics were disastrous. Questions mounted. Why had Andrew maintained a friendship with Epstein even after his first conviction? What did Andrew know about his crimes? And why had he chosen to continue the relationship when others had distanced themselves? The devastating details that followed began to unravel the prince's carefully maintained image. Victims of Epstein came forward with testimonies that directly implicated Andrew in disturbing ways. One woman, Virginia Giuffre, alleged that she had been trafficked to Andrew when she was underage, claims that Andrew strongly denied but which captured global attention. For the royal family, the accusations were catastrophic. Even if never proven in a court of law, the public perception was damning. Andrew's response only worsened the crisis. In what became one of the most infamous interviews in royal history, he sat down with the BBC in 2019, attempting to clear his name. Instead, the interview revealed his lack of empathy, bizarre explanations, and a shocking inability to grasp the seriousness of the situation. His insistence that he could not have been involved because he was at a Pizza Express restaurant in Woking that evening, or his claim that he was physically incapable of sweating, became the subject of ridicule. What was meant to be a moment of clarification turned into a global embarrassment. Behind palace walls, the fallout was severe. The Queen, who had long been Andrew's staunchest defender, faced unprecedented pressure from both the public and within the monarchy itself. The institution's reputation was on the line, and it became clear that Andrew could no longer serve in any official royal capacity. In 2022, he was stripped of his military titles and royal patronages, effectively exiled from public life. What shocked many observers most was not just Andrew's connection to Epstein, but the attitude he displayed throughout the scandal. Rather than humility or accountability, he projected defensiveness and entitlement. Friends and insiders revealed that he truly believed the storm would pass, that his status as the Queen's son would shield him from permanent damage. But the reality was very different. For perhaps the first time in modern royal history, public outrage over one member was so strong that not even the crown itself could protect him. The devastating details that emerged during this period painted a grim picture of a man out of touch with reality. Testimonies from those who worked with him suggested he had long operated in a bubble of privilege, convinced he was untouchable. His downfall was not just the result of one scandal, but of decades of unchecked behavior that finally collided with accountability. By the time lawsuits and settlements came into play, the damage to Andrew's reputation was beyond repair. No amount of legal maneuvering could restore what had been lost. The world had seen enough, and the devastating truth was clear. The prince, once celebrated for his service and charm, was now synonymous with disgrace. If the Epstein scandal shattered Prince Andrew's public standing, the devastating new details that surfaced afterward have ensured his reputation may never recover. While much of the world focused on the BBC interview and subsequent lawsuit, behind the palace walls there were far more damaging revelations, stories of cover-ups, desperation, and a family in crisis. Palace insiders have since admitted that Andrew's relationship with Epstein had been a source of concern for years, long before it erupted into headlines. Aides had reportedly warned him repeatedly about the risks of maintaining such a friendship, but Andrew dismissed their advice. Some staff members claimed they were even ordered to arrange meetings and trips connected to Epstein's circle, which placed them in morally compromising situations. These accounts suggest that the palace knew far more than it publicly acknowledged, and that Andrew ignored multiple chances to step away before disaster struck. Even more shocking were the revelations about the legal negotiations that followed. When Virginia Giuffre filed her lawsuit against Andrew in the United States, the royal family faced a nightmare scenario: a senior prince being dragged through a public trial. To prevent this, secret discussions took place behind closed doors. Reports revealed that the Queen herself contributed toward the financial settlement Andrew eventually paid, using her private funds. This detail stunned the public. The image of a monarch personally financing her disgraced son's defense contradicted everything the crown was supposed to represent. For critics, it reinforced the notion that Andrew believed he was above accountability, shielded not by law, but by privilege. New accounts also paint a troubling picture of Andrew's behavior during this period. Far from being humbled by the scandal, sources described him as bitter and defiant, convinced that he had been unfairly targeted. According to insiders, Andrew complained endlessly about being cut off from royal life, insisting he was the victim of a smear campaign. Some described him as unable, or unwilling, to grasp the magnitude of the damage he had caused, both to himself and to the monarchy. These details further highlight the deep divisions his scandal created within the royal family. While the Queen remained protective of her son, other senior royals reportedly pressed for harsher measures. King Charles, then Prince of Wales, and Prince William were said to be deeply concerned that Andrew's presence risked overshadowing the monarchy's future. Behind the scenes, arguments broke out about whether Andrew should ever be allowed a path back to public duties. The devastating truth was clear. The scandal had not only ruined Andrew's reputation, but had shaken the unity of the royal family itself. Meanwhile, the press continued to uncover disturbing new stories. Reports surfaced of Andrew's lavish lifestyle, funded in part through questionable financial dealings and mysterious benefactors. These raised further questions about his judgment and the circles he moved in. The more that was revealed, the clearer it became that his downfall was not the result of one mistake, but of a long pattern of reckless choices. The devastating new details about Andrew's connections, finances, and private conduct left the monarchy struggling to contain the damage. Even after his public exile, each revelation reignited public anger and reinforced the image of a man who had squandered not only his royal privilege, but also his honor. For Andrew, the scandal was no longer just a chapter in his life. It had become the defining story of his existence. As the devastating details continued to emerge, it became increasingly clear that Prince Andrew's future within the royal family was not simply uncertain, it was effectively over. What once seemed like temporary exile has now become permanent removal, and the monarchy has shown no indication of reversing course. For Andrew, the consequences have been both personal and public, reshaping every aspect of his life. One of the most telling signs of his downfall was the stripping of his military affiliations and royal patronages. These honors had been central to his identity, symbols of service and stature that connected him to both the armed forces and countless charitable organizations. When Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew would return these roles and no longer use the style of His Royal Highness in an official capacity, it was more than a demotion. It was a public declaration that his days as a working royal were finished. For a man once celebrated as the hero of the Falklands, it was a humiliating reversal that underscored just how far he had fallen. Privately, friends and associates described Andrew as isolated and adrift. He spends much of his time at the Royal Lodge in Windsor, away from the public eye, rarely appearing in public except for family occasions where his presence is carefully managed. Insiders say he remains frustrated, still convinced he could return to public duties if given the chance, though those hopes have been firmly rejected by senior royals. In truth, the scandal has left him without a role, without responsibilities, and without the respect that once came naturally with his position. For the monarchy itself, Andrew's disgrace has left scars that may never fully heal. The royal family has long relied on an image of dignity, duty, and restraint, but Andrew's story became a glaring contradiction. The fact that the Queen, in her final years, was drawn into the mess, even contributing to his settlement, remains one of the most controversial aspects of the saga. For many observers, it symbolized how Andrew's mistakes placed unnecessary strain on an already aging monarch. With King Charles now on the throne, the approach toward Andrew has grown even firmer. Charles, determined to streamline the monarchy and safeguard its reputation, has made it clear that his brother will not play a public role moving forward. Prince William, too, is said to have voiced strong objections to Andrew's return to any form of royal duty. The next generation is acutely aware that public trust is fragile, and that Andrew's presence could undo years of careful work to modernize the monarchy. Yet, despite these decisions, the devastating details continue to shadow the royal family. Each new revelation about Andrew, from financial irregularities to lingering questions about his associations, keeps the scandal alive. For the British public, the issue is not just about one prince's mistakes, but about the accountability of an institution that has often seemed above scrutiny. Andrew's downfall has become a test case for how the monarchy responds to failure within its own ranks. Perhaps the most tragic element of all is the personal cost. Andrew was once seen as a dashing figure, a war hero, and a prince with a promising role in the monarchy. Today, he is viewed by many as a cautionary tale of arrogance, poor judgment, and squandered privilege. The devastating new details that have emerged ensure that his legacy will not be defined by service or duty, but by scandal and disgrace. In the end, the story of Prince Andrew is not just about a royal scandal. It is about the consequences of choices, the fragility of reputation, and the way one man's downfall cast a shadow over an entire institution. His future is sealed, and the monarchy moves forward without him, but the devastating details of his story will remain part of royal history forever.